Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Jesus in a Dream podcast, where we believe with Jesus in a Dream, anything is possible, nothing is impossible, and the possibilities are endless. I'm Caleb. This is Zach.
Hey, everyone.
And we want to enjoy life and build God's kingdom. We're back with one of our first guest episodes, and it's exciting because we've had his son, we've had his daughter, and now we have the man himself, Mr. Todd Marshall. Thank you for joining us on the Jesus in a Dream podcast.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. I just turned 60 years old, so I'm thinking I might be one of your most senior guests ever.
You are by a long shot.
Oh, man, thank you for that.
But that's okay because you have produced two wonderful guests for us, and you can only do that with age, right? Well, I guess we could have. No.
Yeah.
They're both in their late 20s now. So
why don't you 30s?
Yeah. Wow. I wasn't going to say anything about that. Todd, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about your family and a little bit about your ministry and passion.
So I'm a South Dakota boy. Lived a little bit in California. I've actually lived coast to coast. So grew up in the Black Hills, South Dakota. Left there after high school and went to North Central Bible College, which is now North Central University in Minneapolis, and ended up walking out, unplanned, but ended up walking out with a degree in sacred music. Met my wife, Brenda, there, and we've been in ministry together now, oh my goodness, coming up on 40 years.
It's amazing.
Life in minute. Well, it has been life together for 40 years. Celebrated 37 years of marriage and ministry together. And I've ministered as a worship arts pastor in 3 different churches. Started right here in the Twin Cities for 11 and a half years. And then that's where our daughter Kelsey was born, right here. And then went to Wisconsin from 97 to 2000, served as worship arts pastor there. That's where our son Taylor was born. And then when he was 2 years old, we went to New York and served there, a big church in Long Island. Great time there, 13 and a half years. Just a great time ministry. All 30 years of our church life ministry, my wife and I produced and directed, big seasonal productions, Christmas, Easter, that whole scene. New York church was really unique in the sense that every Sunday we had a 40-piece orchestra and 60-voice choir, 3 services on Sunday morning for the last 5 years that we were there. Anyway, so there 13 and a half years. And at the end of that time, the Lord dramatically called me out to start this ministry that we now call Worship is Life. And so 9 years ago, we moved back here to the Twin Cities. And it's just been a wild, frightening, but fulfilling ride. And it's great to be with you guys here. We've had you on our podcast, along with many great
What's the name of that
guests.
podcast for the
people? That is the Worship is Life podcast. So everything we do is under the title of Worship is Life. And my son Taylor is the producer of that. We have, I think, 32 episodes out. So we went 19 weeks in a row, I think, and now we're doing like once a month.
Cool.
As you know, just another way to spread the influence and get the content out there that people can find and listen to and be blessed to. Be blessed by. And now we have the biggest joy of our life is our 2-year-old grandson named Zane. And actually, that's one of our most listened to podcasts is my daughter and her husband.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
Made me cry.
Yeah.
Go and listen to that. What's the name of that episode?
It's called From Infertility to Parenthood.
Yeah.
So they went a few years trying and we're actually going down the road of other means. And bam, the Lord blessed them with Zane. And it's just been...
Yeah, go and listen to that episode because, he summed it up in literally 10 seconds, but I think it's a 2-part. Is it 2 parts?
No, but it's a longer one. Yeah,
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So definitely go and check that out. Check out the Worship is Life podcast. Todd, the first question that comes to my mind is if you've listened to our episodes with Taylor and Kelsey, Taylor is a traveling musician, entrepreneur. Kelsey is doing her permanent jewelry business, which she just launched around the time we had her on the episode.
Yeah.
You have launched Worship is Life, and you do all of these other endeavors. So it seems like adventure is kind of in the Marshall blood. And I was just wondering, where do you see that coming from? Was your family like that? And maybe how did you even cultivate that in your children to trust God the way that they do?
So the trusting part, I think they have observed. I would never call myself personally an adventurous person.
This guy has traveled around the world, done ministry in Pakistan, the Philippines, Israel, and he does an adventure. Yeah, okay,
I don't think of
All right,
myself
Todd.
as I mean, seriously, my wife and myself, neither one of us think of ourselves as adventurous or entrepreneurial. That's why I said scary journey, because when the Lord very dramatically called me out, which included calling my family out, it was for me, it was just like, and that's why I say where the kids have learned trust. So I am thankful that, however that came to be, I've just always been determined to try to respond in obedience to what I sense the Lord calling me to do, which that's all a mystery thing, of course. I do think when you say where did it come from, I would say my dad is kind of a dreamer and has a little bit, he has an entrepreneurial side to him. So maybe that got passed down. But with Taylor, I'm not sure. I think that's just a God thing that he's definitely wired that way. Kelsey, her husband definitely is, and so with Kelsey, I think some of that influence has come more from her husband than from me. But the trusting thing, they've definitely experienced and witnessed. But for me, every time I've stepped out, it's been with fear and trepidation. It hasn't been with adventure and entrepreneurialism. It's been with insecurity, fear, and trepidation. And yet, as I, even in that fear and trepidation and insecurity, as I've stepped out in obedience, the Lord has responded with provision and direction, and blessing, and so it's a unique mix in our family.
No, that I love that. And I love that you said that, because I think not everybody who is called to the adventure that is being obedient to Jesus has that natural inclination to go like the Peter, right? I'm ready to jump out of the boat. I'm ready to die with you. I'm ready to I'll go anywhere. I'll do anything. But there are people like yourself who go like, listen, like I want to follow you, but it's scary. And I think even for like the Peters, and I would say like I'm also like, I am adventurous. That's what I crave in life. I want that, but it's still super scary sometimes. It is easier to just have all your ducks in a row and feel like you are in control and all of that stuff. So I would love to just get your thoughts on how in your own story and in your own journey have you seen the Lord move even through maybe that fear and that trepidation, and what have you learned even about yourself in all of that? Because I think we do have people listening, and even like for myself sometimes, that it's like, that gung-ho-ness isn't always there. Sometimes it is just like, let me just stay in the boat one time.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Oh, I think through the process of the decades, I've learned a lot about identity, and I teach, when I get the opportunity, I like just talking to people about their identity, and security is connected. Like when you talk identity and security, so I do have a small book that I've written under the same title, Worship is Life, and chapter 3 is titled Identity and Security, because they are so closely connected, and yet there's a few distinctions between them if you want to separate the two words. But yeah, just, I think the Lord has shown me some insights through my own journey, just about what identity is and how to try to wrap your mind around it a little bit about it so you can process it more. Because, like when you think of identity, like it's not an easy word to wrestle down. Like I've had Christians actually say to me, okay, my identity is in Christ. What does that even mean? What does it mean, my identity? Because we hear that all the time, right? Our identity is in Christ. What does that even mean? And so just wrestling that down in myself, like for instance, when I was at our last place in New York on staff, I thought my identity was like really strongly secure in the Lord. Like, I'm not going to go into examples, but I just felt like I felt like I was really strong in who I was in the Lord. And then when God called me out of 30 years of church staff ministry to an adventurous entrepreneurial lifestyle that I did not want to live, I mean, it was like my midlife crisis. I thought I was like 100 feet deep in the Lord. And when we got called out and left all of our quote unquote security, which is always just, it's perceived security. It's not real security. It's just perceived security. When we got called out from that, I was like paralyzed, inwardly. Like I was starting my master's, which was intimidating, but that gave me something to do. I was starting this new ministry, which I was trying to, because I'd never started something like that. I mean, I guess if you went back and looked at like how we developed these productions that we'd done, that was a stepping out. But still, it was just kind of part of our, it was just part of our job, and just some gifts that were hidden in my wife and I came out, and it was great. But it wasn't to the level of something like trying to figure out something like this that we had never done before. And man, I just realized I'm about 1 inch deep in the Lord. I thought I was 100 feet deep in the Lord. I'm about 1 inch deep in the Lord, in my literal trust. And so, just helping people wrestle down, what is identity? What does that mean? And then when you discover what that is, like, then how do you start recognizing where you're looking? So one of the things I do in helping people wrestle that down is using some other words that could kind of show where we're looking for identity. And so the words I use are like words like fulfillment, contentment, happiness, peace. Where we're looking for those types of things, that's where we are finding our identity in who we are. And so if we're able to step back and say, wow, I'm chasing that to feel content, to feel fulfilled, to feel I'm chasing what I'm doing. I'm chasing what others think of me. I'm chasing what I have. When I'm chasing that above, like all those things are things that are meant to be given to us as gifts, but when we're chasing them for fulfillment, that's a barometer of where we're chasing our identity. And so we're chasing that instead of who we are as a child of God, who we are as a friend of God, who we are as a servant of God. So that's been one of the biggest discoveries for me, and helps for others in that journey.
That's really good stuff.
I've got a question for you. How do you split the difference between when you say identity in Christ, and yet what you do is such a huge part of like how people know you? So, because that's one thing I've always said is like, or that I've always been told is like, okay, if you say, who are you? And then you use like a job description or what you do, then it's like, okay, you're identifying as that job and not like who you are. So talk to me about how you clear the waters there for your own life.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm a big words guy. I mean, I believe words are significant. Words form us, words shape us. So I'm always looking for the right words to describe something. I'm always careful about the words I'm using. I know that's not big revelation or anything, but I'm just really passionate and intentional about that. So when I'm teaching about that, I use some words to help break that down that go like opposite of fulfillment. So like in particular, you're talking about what I do, like, because in teaching the things, in the three things that I mentioned, what we're doing, what others are thinking of us, what we have, those three lies, like I am what I do, I am what others think of me, I am what I have, those three lies are directly correlated to the three tests that Jesus went through in the wilderness with Lucifer. I won't go into all that right now, but
it's a great connection though.
yeah, it is a great connection. And so the I am what I do, so all of those, I have this distinction with fulfillment and the lie. So like with what I do, what you're asking about now is the other word is accomplishment. Fulfillment versus accomplishment. In other words, we were created to work, right? We've all been given something to do. Now our tendency is to over focus on what we're doing. That's our humanity, because that's what we can control. That's what we can see results from. That's what can make us feel good about ourselves, what we're getting done. And when we chase that, when we over focus on what we're doing, then that is when we hinder intimacy of relationship. So that's one way I think of it. But anyway, back to the word thing. So then I make this distinction in what I do. I make this distinction between the word fulfillment and the word accomplishment. So in other words, we were created to have a sense of accomplishment in what we do. Like it's a wonderful feeling to feel that sense of accomplishment. And that is okay. That is from our Creator to have that sense of accomplishment. But we were never created to find our fulfillment in what we do. And so when we chase fulfillment in what we're doing, that's when we're chasing our identity in what we're doing. Because you hear the word workaholic, right? That's someone who is chasing fulfillment in what they're doing. And that hinders intimacy in relationships. So that distinction between fulfillment and accomplishment. Yes, thank you, Lord, for this sense of accomplishment when I look out at the lawn that I just mowed or the deck that I just built. I love that feeling of accomplishment, but that's not who I am. That's not my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is staying engaged and connected with you, so I can love the people that are around me.
That's really good. Yeah, everything you've said has been so good so far, and we're just going to keep it moving because I want to hear more. So, you kind of hinted at this. I want to continue on the same thread of accomplishment, and I guess I'll add my own thought here. Is I really believe when it comes to identity, and I'm still discovering this in my own adventure, is one of the ways that God helps us come face to face with who we really are is by removing everything else, like removing a job, removing certain relationships, removing these things that you might have said like, oh, this is this. And I think every single person goes through this when they go from like childhood to adulthood is like you get removed from a certain type of relationship that was a big part of who you are with your parents. Yeah. And now it's like, well, who am I? I think everybody goes through that at some point. But then I think God uses that same kind of formula like in our lives as believers when things get removed or things get added, and then it's like, who am I? But this is what I wanted to hit on when you're talking about accomplishment, and you mentioned it in passing, and I knew exactly what you're talking about. No, but probably not a lot of other people caught it. Is you said when you left your job, you were in a master's program, so you had something to do. And when I got called out of my job and into MyMountain, it was a lot of, I don't know what to do, but it was also, I don't have a lot to do. It feels like I do. I should be starting something. I should have a lot. I don't know what I'm doing, so I don't have a lot to do. And that brought so much insecurity within me because of this accomplishment thing. I think it was God going, hey, like you want something to do. You need something to do. And like, if you can't just sit with me, you don't feel like, or when I'm asking you just to sit with me, you have more time in your day to spend with me, and that feels gross to you. And like I had to come face to face with that. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on when you were first starting out, or even now, to be comfortable with who you are and your identity in Christ when you have maybe nothing to do, or maybe when God is going like, I just want you to wait. Like, it's not that there isn't things to do, but this is just a season of waiting or
Yeah.
whatever. Love to hear your just insights on that.
Yeah. For one, I still go through it. Like, I've been in this new ministry now. We're in our 9th year, and I still wrestle through that, because you just always feel like, man, if what I'm called to do right now is to be perceived as successful, even in my own eyes, then I feel like I should be doing more. So I'm still there. But yeah, going back to like the beginning of coming out of that, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it was like it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because I look back on that, and the angst that created was real, and yet I did have more time to just meditate and rest and listen. And part of that is hugely connected to like the shift that happened in our ministry a couple years in. So when we first started, and I won't tell the whole story of the dramatic way God called me out that I've referenced to a couple times, but I literally heard the Lord interrupt my thoughts 3 different times in a 72-hour period with very specific sentences, like I had never heard before, and can't even really say that I've heard since. And one of the words was, I've given you a message about worship for my church, and I'm positioning you so that message will have a greater influence. And so I'm like, okay, so that was like the third and definitive word. I'm like, all right, so there's a message. And so, and I think this happens to us a lot, where God impresses or literally speaks something very clear that could even shift your life's direction. But it could even be just where you're at, and you're already in something, but it's just something new. And you get that word and you know it's from the Lord, but then the tendency is then just to take that and run. Okay, that's the word. Okay, got it, Lord. Thank you. Now I'm going to figure out how to do it and what to do. And so I thought this message about worship, I thought the focus was our corporate worship. When we come together, the attitude we bring into it, what it looks like, and then so the message that I gave for that first 2 years was all focused on all these dynamics and elements that involve our corporate worship and when we come together. Because I was seeing certain trends that were just disturbing to me and just didn't feel as authentic as it should be. And so I was going to come out and change the world, right? Well, it was because of those times, that extra time that I had every morning, my quiet times with the Lord went from a half hour to an hour to like 2 and 3 hours, of just, because like there's things I should be doing, and there were things that I were doing, but I wasn't punching a clock, at the church office. And so I was just able to give over that time. Part of it was because I was just I was frozen, and I'm like, God, I need to keep hearing. And through that, just more and more insights began to come, and it was just like, okay, this message is not supposed to be focused on our corporate worship. And all those things that I gave in that first message, like if I'm teaching somewhere for several days, all those elements still come out because they're still significant. But the shift went to, okay, what does a life of worship look like? So the questions I asked myself, and now I'm asking others is, what is the connection between a worship service and a life of worship? And why does that connection matter? And so that whole time led to just a complete shift of focus in the message, and then insights that came out of those times of just listening and lingering in Scripture, just literally just listening for what the Lord. And even though identify it of hearing as clearly. Again, another mystery, right? Hearing from the Lord as clearly as those really unique times that the Lord spoke. I mean, the Lord obviously knew that to call me out of that into this, it had to be pretty radically clear, and it was radically clear. But since then, it's just been impressions. You know, a lot of when we hear from Lord, it's impressions that then get confirmed, and it's like, okay, that's you, Lord, that's you, and then you you see that, and then He helps you form it and shape it, and so that time, that season, just brought a whole shifting in what this was supposed to look like, and in the process of that, just more resting in who I am. Okay, God's going to take care of me because I'm His child. God's going to help me because I'm His friend. God's going to show me what to do because I am His servant.
That's good. I'll add one thing and then I'll let you go. In those times for me, I'm a lot more comfortable with it now. But you had mentioned this earlier in your 3 lies of, what do other people think about me?
Yeah.
Something that would cause that insecurity when it was like, you're right. It's like, I went from reading my Bible and praying from 30 minutes to this is my whole morning.
Yeah.
But I would always get the next step. I would always get another revelation. I would always learn more about myself. And it was way more beneficial than probably any email or spreadsheet I could have filled out at the time. But one of the biggest reasons I had insecurity was I always had this thought in the back of my mind, whether it was myself or the enemy, going, if people knew what you were doing right now, they wouldn't think you're successful. Like, you're making a fool of yourself. Like, you quit a job to do this.
Yeah.
And
I think about that when it comes to my supporters.
Yeah,
my monthly supporters.
Like, if my donors knew that I spent 3 hours praying today, and I'm not, like, I think I do want to make a distinction. Like, there is a difference between, like, being lazy. And this is the distinction I didn't have in my mind. I thought I was being lazy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm reading the Bible, I'm praying, I'm, like, researching, like, theology, like, what does this have to do with what I'm trying to do? And it was that, like, you're being lazy. I know that thought was from the enemy. That wasn't my own self. That was like, you're being lazy. What if your donors knew about this? What about the people that you're trying to help?
That's just a part of culture too.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need the enemy to tell us what we think we should be working because that's what our culture, shows us and tells us. And there's value in the balance of that. But our world shows us that this is what you get when you do this, and so if you do this more, you'll get more of this. If you do this better, you'll get more of this, and so it just comes from just what's ingrained to us from day one. Yeah.
And one more thought on this, just to, like, I guess confirm it, is when people did find out that's what I was doing, it was never met with the negativity that I thought they would be thinking. Like, oh, good. Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's wise.
Man,
like,
I wish I could be living like that right now. Yeah.
So my question is, when you heard those words from the Lord, did they, like, how did they feel? I guess is my thing. Because I get ideas and stuff out of left field in my head all the time. And I'm always thinking, is this a voice from, like, is this an idea from God? Is this something like a prompting or something? Or is this just my creative brain coming up? Because I have, like, facilitated that in my own brain of just allowing, like, random thoughts to come in, because I use those in my creative work. And so just, like, ideas come and, like, oh yeah, write that one down, that's a good one. So I encourage that. But then it's like, is that just one of those ideas? Or, so that's what my asking to you is, like, was that something that was like, oh, whoa, this is kind of a strange idea? Or was it like something you're like, nope, yep, that is very, like, I knew, if someone else said it, I would have said that was from the Lord anyways, or something like that.
That's a great question, and the tables are definitely turned right now, because I ask that question to every guest that I have on, because our whole deal is showing people this God's relational pattern of revelation response. So God reveals, and then we respond, and then God responds. And so I'm always curious, like you're asking, what is it like for other people to hear the Lord? How does the Lord show himself to other people? Because I do think, even though there's similarities, there's uniqueness to each one. And in general, that answer to that question is, since it's full of mystery, it's still challenging to wrestle down. And I'm trying to, as you're asking the question, I'm trying to think how I would describe it. Because when I'm speaking and I share that story, the way I say it is that his voice, it was so clear, it may as well have been audible, is how I describe it. So it was 3 times: a Sunday morning, a Tuesday morning, a Wednesday morning. It wasn't an audible voice like I'm hearing you right now, but it was so clear it may as well have been audible, is the best way I can describe it. It was just...
Or it wasn't just some vague, like, oh, I wonder if some
Exactly.
random place somewhere needs this, you know?
Exactly. It was just that clear. Now, the one caveat I will add to that is that I was in a place of desperation, which is very interesting, that the clarity of his voice was I believe directly connected to my level of desperately wanting to hear.
So you were in a posture of listening.
I was
ready to hear
absolutely in a
something.
posture, because after being there for 13 and a half years and being in that same type of ministry for 30 years, I was in a place where everything I had been doing for 30 years, instead of giving me life, was sucking the life out of me. And because of that, I knew a big change was coming. But like I told you, I'm not adventurous and I'm not entrepreneurial. So that was a scary thing, because in the transitions that, like when we went from church number 1 to church number 2 and church number 2 to church number 3, every one of those moves was scary for me, because I'm more of a settler than a pioneer. And I had things that were very comfortable where I was, and the idea of moving on was very scary. And so, what's the statement? Let me think of this statement, because it's a tricky statement and I have to think about it to get it right. Basically, the need when you're a settler, or when you're semi-content in where you are, the lack of contentment in where you are needs to get to a point of outweighing the fear of what it would be to go somewhere else. It's just a different way of saying the same thing. But that being said, even though I was like, I can't keep living like this. Like, I just knew a change was coming. And so I was just like, I'm like, Lord, what are you saying? Or what's going on? What do you want to say? So yes, my antennas were wide, or my ears were wide open. My antennas were up as far as I could get them. Which, that always, for me, that always is like, okay, so where are you now? Are you desperate? Are you that desperate, even though you know you're where you're supposed to be? Are you desperate enough to really have your ears open that wide and your antennas up that high to hear? So that's another mysterious place that we kind of always want to be, in that place. And yet I think living in a place of desperation can sound not fun either. So yeah, it's
Can I ask a follow-up on that
Yeah,
one? So
please.
immediately after that, and so you left your job to pursue this new area. How did you do the actual, the steps it's those ones that you got the big vision, the direction, but then it's like making those steps towards it, I feel like is really tricky, because I feel like what a lot of people want, including myself, is like the Lord to keep saying, put your foot here, put your foot there. And you want it in those big dramatic ways that are like, oh, this is super clear. But a lot of times that doesn't happen, because God made us intelligent and we can figure things out on our own. And he doesn't have to, tell us every single step, but there are times he does. And so, I was curious if you had any.
That's a great question. And that's another big mystery. I was thinking about that when we went and saw, my wife and I a few weeks ago went and saw the His Only Son movie, that's out, the Abraham and Isaac story. Yeah.
I haven't heard of it.
Yeah.
No.
His Only Son. It's not an action movie. Don't go if you want an action movie. but it's done really well. Just a low budget movie that doesn't come across like a low budget movie, but the story of Abraham and sacrificing Isaac, and just again, even just hearing him talk to when he heard from the Lord, and he's telling his servant who's been with him for decades, and his servant says, he's like, it's been years since you've heard. It's been years since you've heard from the Lord like that. And Abraham's like, yeah, I know. So exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, so like we were still, okay, try to make this quick. So Wednesday, I heard the Lord that third time. I told my pastor on Thursday. And won't go into the whole story, but he wanted to make it public right away because of some other things that were happening in the church. And so literally within 2 weeks, I had told my entire choir, my entire orchestra, my entire team, all the pastors, and then it got announced on Sunday morning, like 2 weeks later. And we knew, and we had, so anyway.
So the Band-Aid was just ripped right off. You didn't,
yes and
sit
no.
with that for years, right?
Yes, that's true. It was ripped right off. It was out there for everybody to know, but we ended up being on staff there for 8 more months. So this was May of 2013, and we did not leave till February of 2014. And it was a gracious period where the pastor was cool with it, and I had this conversation with him, and he was asking me, so what are you thinking? What do you, and I'm like, so I'm just thinking that either a door's going to open and we're going to know, or you're going to find someone to replace me, or we're just going to hear from the Lord and say, okay, leave now, go there. So that was like the 3 options. And we were, and so we were kind of walking through together, which was kind of cool because our entire team and our entire congregation walked through this process with us and observed the process and us walking through the process for that whole 8-month period. And so November of 2013, the one thing of the 3 options that we thought would be the least is the one that would happen. And that was they found someone that they thought would be the one to follow us in our role. Because what we were doing was just when you talk about the choir, the orchestra, the productions we did, like that whole thing that we were doing, like that is not commonly done today. So to find someone to come in and take that role and fill those shoes, we knew it was going to be a challenging scenario. And we thought that would be like the third thing that could possibly happen. Ended up being the first thing. We're like, okay, Lord, there they are. So we got to go. And so we just felt like this area, the Twin Cities, where we had been for 17 years, geographically made most sense for us to come back to because we just had a lot of relationships here. And so that networking. So we came back here and then started taking the step and the doing and that whole part of the process.
That's really good. I'm going to keep moving because this is all just so good and we could talk about all of this stuff for forever, but I'm going to ask this question selfishly now because I want to know the answer. I feel like I'm in this season where the Lord spoke, I listened, I obeyed, it made a lot of sense. I saw a lot of fruit in it. Mm-hmm. Most of the vision is still the same. However, there are parts of the original vision that are now changing.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it's like, well, God, I thought you said this. And like, obviously, this is a very common thing. You look in scripture, God tells them to do one thing and then that thing gets fulfilled or things change. And that's what I've always told people is like, vision changes. Like, if I would be a fool if my vision was, I want to get a building. And then when I get a building, my vision is still, I want to get a building. Like, that's not how vision is, and that's not how God works either. But it's hard to let go of good things or things that you think are going to happen that maybe you haven't even seen fulfilled yet. And the Lord is going, well, let's turn a little bit kitty corner here. Like, I'm not getting rid of everything. Like, it's not some big, like, leave your job. Like, I'm not leaving my mountain, but there are things within my mountain that's like, okay, you thought it was going to be this way. And that's true because I told you, but now it's time to shift the vision a little bit.
Yeah.
And in those moments, it's just really hard to like reconcile because I don't feel like everything has been fulfilled that I thought I heard, but now there's this new word and it's fresh and it is still exciting, but it's also like, do I hold on to both? And I feel like in this one particular area, the Lord is saying like, nope, let that be like dead. And the word that I actually got was dead things create fruit. Like the seed must die for it to create fruit. And so I don't know if you have any, like you had said earlier that 2 years into it, it kind of shifted for you, while also keeping a lot of the same like flavor and elements. So I don't know if you have any wisdom to share on that.
Well, as you were talking about it, I thought of another movie.
Good. We like to talk about movies on this podcast.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite Easter movie. I watch it every Easter Sunday.
I don't think I've ever heard of an Easter movie, so I'm already
a resurrection
intrigued.
movie. Yeah, it's my favorite Easter movie. It's only like, what year are we in? I think it came out in 2016, something like that. It's called Risen.
Okay.
Risen.
That literally just popped up on my Netflix or whatever.
It is so good. So it's the story of the main centurion.
Oh, I've heard of this. Yeah.
And he is called to investigate because of all the issues that it's creating for Pilate and all that thing, and they need a body and so anyway, so it's from his perspective and his story. And what I was thinking about is after so he's not at the crucifixion till the end. Sees Jesus dead on the cross, looking right at his face. They have Jesus' eyes open even though he's dead there. So he's looking, and then he walks in to the room where Jesus and the disciples are after the resurrection because they're investigating and trying to come up with a body. And he walks into the room as they're searching all these houses and sees them. Anyway, so then later he is with the disciples as they are being chased, as they're going to Galilee. They're being chased by the Romans. And finally they get away. And so anyway, so he's talking to Peter. And he's asking Peter all these questions. And Peter's like, honestly, we don't know. He's like, it's like we're trying to figure it out. It's like we're on this. He's got us on this journey, and we think he's telling us this, and we think but anyway, it's just that whole. It's what we're talking about, right? It's that whole discovery that it's the same for every person, whether you walked with Jesus face to face or whether you're walking with him like we walk with him. It's this whole journey of discovery. And the other thing I was thinking of too is I've heard this said, which I can totally see it in my life. I've seen it in your life because we haven't really said yet that you and I have pretty regularly conversations as we meet. And one of the things I've heard, one of the ways I've heard it explained is because as the Lord, and that two things. Number one is he leads us as he knows us. He leads us out of how he knows us. And so connected with that is that, let's say we have point A, point B, point C, and he wants to get us to point C, but he knows to get us there, he's got to first take us to point B, is another way I've heard it described. So you take that, and then if you combine it, again, just going back to the whole thing, and I haven't really said this yet, our whole Worshipers Life ministry is what we do is we use the language of worship to talk about relationship. Really is what we do. So relationship with God, but then not just relationship with God, how that always translates into relationship with others. So worship. So after 40 years of worship arts ministry, my synthesized definition of worship is literally worship equals relationship. Worship equals relationship. And so anyway, with what we're talking about, when you look through the lens of relationship, that's really what it's all about. It just always comes back to accepting the invitation of relationship with your Creator, your Redeemer, and your Helper. And a huge part of that then is saying, okay, God, my life is yours, so lead me where you want me to go to do what you want me to do. So the doing is always coming out of relationship, right? And so that bringing all those pieces together, God leads us how he knows us, which is very relational, right? He honors the relationship he has with us by leading us how he knows us. Okay, I know you, Caleb, are wired like this. I want you to get here. And so to get you there, because I know you, I'm going to lead you this way to get you there. And then our part in the relationship is we want to stay in a place of listening. We want to stay in a place of looking. We want to stay in a willing place of responding to what we're hearing and what we're seeing. So yeah, really, it just all comes down to relationship and us staying engaged in that mysterious, invisible relationship that is just so different than. I mean, there's similarities in how we do relationship with each other and how we do relationship with God, but we all know that there's still a lot of unique, mysterious ways that it's different, because we don't see God like we see each other. We don't hear God exactly the same way we hear each other. We don't touch, feel God exactly the same we do each other. So it's mysterious, but we've experienced how real it is. But it's all a relational dynamic. It's all a relational dynamic.
That's really good, and that made me think of Psalm 119. It's the psalmist says, "I obey your laws and precepts, for you know all of my ways." And I've always understood that or interpreted that as the reason that I can obey with everything within me is because God knows me better than myself.
Yeah.
Like his laws are made for me for good, right?
Yeah.
And so I like that answer. And
Yeah.
That definitely helps, because I think there are things where that helps me release the vision, I think, in some ways, because I look back at myself 4 years ago and I'm not the same person I was then. Praise God. Like the essence of me is I'm still Caleb.
Yeah.
But the things I've learned, the things I've done, the things I'm fulfilled by, all of that identity piece, I would say is the fragments were there 4 years ago, and now it feels like I have a pretty good idea of who I am. And I think, like you're saying, God understands that, and now it's time to go in a similar direction, but it's not the exact same.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have anything to add. We're probably on our time here.
We're up on time. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to add anything?
I've got one last question.
Yeah.
So since you lived in the middle of the U.S. on both coasts, right? What's your real 1 minute take on? So therefore, you've seen the average of the United States. You've lived on both sides and in the middle. What's your take on just all three spots there? The people, or the land, or culture differences?
I would just say when you take that combined with all the countries I've been in around the world, I would just say at our core, people are the same everywhere. Like, humanity is humanity. Yes, there's cultures. Yes, there's differences. Yes, our preconceived ideas of people on the West Coast and the East Coast have some truth to them. But at the core, like these identity and security, all that, the growing, that is the same for every person on the planet at every point in history. We are definitely all the same, and we all have the same shortcomings in our wiring, and we all have the same desire to be at peace, and each one of us all are created with a desire to know our purpose, and that is there to point us to our Creator and our Redeemer and our Helper, and therefore we all have the same invitation and the same choice to make, no matter where we are in the country or the world.
That's awesome.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. Okay. So Todd is obviously a gold mine. We're going to have him on again if he wants to come on. But thank you for being here this time. Before we end, could you just tell whoever's listening where they can find more of you or more of Worship is Life?
Oh, sure. So our website is worshipislife.org. And our ministry finds its influence in many different legs, but one of the primary ones is we love to go to a church and bring our Worship is Life message to the congregation, and then also meet with the worship arts team or even a broader range of leaders and give a leadership application to the insights that we share with the congregation. So that's, yeah. And also I have a video. So we have a few resources that are available in our bookstore. I have a video teaching resource if people are leading studies or if they want to study, deeper more into the relational side of worship, but then also the things that happen in our corporate gatherings. There's things like that in that video series. But yeah, worshipislife.org. And my email is todd@worshipislife.org.
Cool. Both of those will be in the description on YouTube. So yeah, thanks for listening. Longer episode today, but this is great. We'll definitely have you back on if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love you guys. We'll see you next time.
See ya.